let me ask you about what I just laid out very quickly, about this string of accomplishments that you have managed to pull off in the United States Senate. This bill, the Inflation Reduction Act that you and your colleagues were able to pass in this marathon session over the weekend, it is being called the largest, most important, most significant legislation since the Affordable Care Act. Do you think it is that big a deal? Do you see it in those terms?
I do. Some have even compared it to things even earlier in the 60s, but it's huge. And look, for years, decades, Congress said we were going to do something about climate change. Nothing happened. We were going to go after the pharmaceutical industry and lower the cost of prescription drugs. Nothing happened. We were going to go after wealthy corporations and individuals who didn't pay a fair share of taxes. Nothing happened. And now all of these things, plus 9 million jobs, plus real deficit reduction, $300 billion, is happening at once. It's an amazing accomplishment, and particularly in light of the fact, Rachel, we have a 50-50 Senate running from Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin. We get no help from the Republicans on these issues. They're intransigent. So it's really something my colleagues stuck together, every one of us, because we knew we had to get something done. It doesn't have everything we want. It doesn't have everything I want. But if you ask the American people, are you anguishing and just concerned that we can't get it, that Congress is gridlocked and can't get anything done? Well, these 6 weeks have brushed that away. And I'll make one more comment, Rachel, about how it might affect things. People are now realizing that the Republican Party is becoming a MAGA Trump Republican Party. The Dobbs decision on choice and the other Supreme Court decisions on guns and on environment, the January 6th hearings, the right-wing rhetoric that comes out of almost so many mainstream or formerly mainstream Republican politicians. They don't like them. But they were wondering, well, if we give the Democrats power after November, keep the House Democratic, increase the number of seats in the Senate, will the Democrats be able to get anything done? I think the last 6 weeks, with all the bills you've mentioned, and particularly this recent bill, answer with a resounding yes. Democrats can get things done in a bipartisan way when Republicans will work with us or are pressured to work with us, but on our own if we have to.
Did you learn something through this process, again, particularly on this bill that you just were able to pass this weekend, about sort of unlocking the lock that has been Senator Manchin of West Virginia, Senator Sinema of Arizona? Those two senators in particular have taken on sort of outsized roles at both in terms of public attention, but also in terms of the ability to decide what legislation moves forward and what doesn't, just because of their willingness to stand with Republicans on some things, or at least not always stand with their Democratic colleagues. Yeah. Do you feel like you've learned more about how to work with them in ways that keep them on side with you?
Well, the bottom line is that in a 50-50 Senate, any one senator can block things. But if you have to keep going at it and finding ways to come together in a way that affects the American people. Look, Joe Manchin and I disagree on climate, but this bill will reduce, this proposal, when it becomes law, is the most massive change in fighting global warming that we've had. It will reduce the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere by 2030 by 40%. Now, the original BBB was better, but 45%, so it's very close. And I'll tell you the one thing I've learned. It's a lesson my dad taught me. My dad passed away in November, but he's still with me. He had to work his whole life in a junky little exterminating business. He hated it, never complained, never resented people who got better breaks than him. But he taught me one thing, that if you work hard at something, when you're doing the right thing, and if you work hard and you persist, the way he put it, God will reward you, you'll succeed. We had a lot of dead ends in this process, but we kept persisting and persisting and persisting, and look what we've achieved, something really, really fine. So my message, persist, don't give up, try to find that common ground, keep your principles, but make sure that you never give up.